I get this question all the time. People want to know, well, how old will I be when I'm in perimenopause? And the answer is it's kind of not the age, it's the stage.
Introducing the Perimenopause podcast, a show dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of achieving optimal health naturally as you transition into perimenopause and menopause. Get ready to join your host, Dr. Seth Yates, an experienced naturopathic doctor, acupuncturist, and kinesiologist, as he shares his wealth of knowledge acquired from over 40,000 patient visits and 15 years in working with perimenopausal females. Welcome to the Perimenopause podcast.
Hey, this is Doc Yates. Welcome to the Perimenopause podcast, brought to you by perimenopause.com and ablehealth.us. And today I want to discuss how do you know if you're in perimenopause? Because the average age reported online is age 40 to 44. Personally, in clinic, I've seen that the average age when I see people by the time they're complaining of these symptoms and I'm testing their hormones, I think it's a little bit older than that. It would be more like 43 to 46. However, I've seen people in their 30s already starting. So it really varies. So it depends more on the symptoms than the age. So what I want to dive into are what are the symptoms that start to change first during perimenopause, and then what are the ones that people expect later? Because a lot of times people are thinking, well, I don't have hot flashes, I don't have night sweats, my cycle's still regular, so I guess I'm not in perimenopause. And those aren't really the symptoms to be watching for. And if you go to your doctor, they're not really going to check anything generally besides LH, FSH. Chances are that those are still fine too. So they'll say, don't worry about it, you're too young for perimenopause. But really, that just means you're too young for menopause, not perimenopause. These are two different things. And remember, perimenopause can last for I've seen up to 10 years. 4 to 10 years before you're in menopause, which means that your cycle has stopped for 1 year. You can be in perimenopause. It can be a long time. So let's discuss some of these symptoms so you can have an idea if these symptoms are going to be related to perimenopause and what you can do about it. The number one thing I see is weight. Now here's the thing. There's a lot of things that can make you gain weight. Okay? For instance, you go to college and you put on the freshman 15, that's not perimenopause, that's probably alcohol. The difference with perimenopause, it's not about whether you gain the weight or not, is all of a sudden the things that you normally used to do to lose weight, like the diet and exercise that would always get the weight off through your 20s and 30s, it's not working anymore. And assuming there's no history of thyroid issues, chances are it's because your progesterone levels have dropped quite a bit relative to your estrogen, and it's making you gain weight. The other thing is with weight, it's important to note, and this is something I see with clients all the time. It's like they're like, all of a sudden I'm gaining weight in my stomach, and I always used to have a flat stomach. If I gained weight, it would be in my hips or legs or chest, but now I've got this like meno belly, meno gut, and it's like, well, that's exactly what that is. Actually, that is the changes in the way you will see fat distribution during the changes of hormone cycles and perimenopause. So, if you're having difficulty losing weight, what you used to do is no longer working, and you're putting the weight on in a different spot, that's a sign that that weight is related to perimenopause. The next thing is sleep. And I've talked about this numerous times, but, excuse me. Okay, excuse me there. Sleep. What you will see is difficulty staying asleep. Now, early on in perimenopause, this sleep disturbance will generally just be around PMS. Okay, so sleep is pretty good, but a few days leading up to your period, you're waking up during the night, and you kind of get stuck awake, and that never used to be the case. As you progress through perimenopause, this period of time starts extending. Sometimes it jumps down to ovulation becomes a problem as well. Sometimes just after your period becomes a problem as well. And then eventually it goes to the only time I sleep well is about a week after my period. And then eventually it's just the sleep sucks all the time. That is a really common one, and that is something that I've seen start many, many, many years. It's almost for me like one of the keynote signs and symptoms that I'm going to ask about if someone's wondering about perimenopause. Okay, the other changes will be mood. You will first start seeing PMS symptoms getting worse, and then you're going to start seeing just teariness getting worse, and then irritability getting worse. Now, here's the kicker. A lot of people in perimenopause are also at that age where now they've got kids, and kids are like, teens, and then they're doing that, plus they're working full time and taking care of the household. So there's that blend of stage where you're getting all of these worse changes in your hormones, and you have all of this extra kind of stress and frustration adding up. So the two kind of form this perfect storm. So for the perimenopause part of it, balancing the hormones makes a big difference. But for that built up stress and those layers I call them like layers of stress that just keep piling on until small things seem like big things, herbal formulas and acupuncture works really good to help with that, because it's not usually just the one thing. That's just the way life is not a vacuum. Like, there's multiple things going on, but it doesn't mean that it's only stress and frustration. Chances are hormone changes are playing a role, especially if you're anywhere from late 30s to 50. Consider the hormone aspect, especially if you're noticing things flaring up a lot along with PMS and after ovulation. From ovulation until the start of your cycle. So for most people, that would be around day 14 to the start of your period. If it's flaring up specifically during that time, you're feeling a lot more irritable, a lot more emotional. Perimenopause. Okay, the next thing is an early sign of perimenopause. It's just changes in your cycle. Like, maybe you were always a 28-day to 30-day cycle, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, now it's shifting down to, like, now I'm like 21 to 24 days. Or some people it shifts the other way up to, 30 to 34 days. And sometimes I had just a client recently where they've been shifting all over the place. They were irregular, and then they went back to 28 days, and then they went to 21, and then they've shifted back up into the 30s. These are all signs of the early onset of perimenopause. As the cycle just starts to become irregular in terms of its timing, and it gets irregular in terms of it can be heavier or lighter. The thing is, there's no consistency with this one. There's no way that I could say that it's going to get shorter and it's going to get heavier, because it's not. It's just going to get different. Whatever how you were tracking before, now it's going to be different. So if you start seeing those changes and things are becoming a lot more irregular, perimenopause. And lastly, libido. Lowered libido in perimenopause is extremely common. But there's a lot of factors. Like, these other 4 factors that I just mentioned are also going to play a role. So it's not just hormones. Because if people's weight changes and then they don't feel good about themselves, their libido is going to go drop. If their sleep has changed and they're going to be more tired, because if you're not sleeping, you're going to be more tired. And if you're more tired, it's not going to increase your libido. I can definitely tell you that. If your mood changes and you're a lot more emotional and frustrated, guess what? That does not equal a higher libido. And with your cycles all over the place, and you're not knowing when you're going to get your period, when you're not going to, and everything's shifting, also not going to result in a higher libido. So all of those things, you can see how hormones play a role, and then hormones can directly affect your libido. On top of that, if there's any relationship issues, not going to help. There's so many contributing factors for that one. So many. So if you're dealing with weight changes, sleep issues, mood changes, changes in your cycle, or libido issues, and even if you're in your late 30s, consider the fact that you could be moving into perimenopause. Okay, so late 30s, anywhere through the 40s, consider perimenopause. I hope this information was helpful. This is Doc Yates, and I am signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to the Perimenopause podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and visit perimenopause.com for more valuable information on how you can thrive during your transition through perimenopause. Join our community of like-minded women who are dedicated to achieving optimal health naturally, and stay up to date with the latest tips, tricks, and advice from Dr. Seth Yates. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Perimenopause Podcast.